Hey guys, Gus Rickard here for Facebook Live episode 5. Today I'm going to answer the question why your low back pain or any other pain for that matter is not in your head. The reason I did this topic is because I get a lot of people in here in chronic pain. For those of you that don't know the difference between chronic pain and acute pain is associated with tissue damage. So if you break a leg or you burn yourself or you fall and sprain your wrist and there's damaged tissues and it hurts, that pain is acute. The definition of chronic pain is pain that lasts longer than the expected time of tissue healing. So if if you sprain your wrist, you go to the physio, you get it wrapped up, they ice it, you ice it, you take anti-inflammatories, you do rehab, and 6 to 8 weeks later, it's still hurting. That pain is chronic. So with chronic pain, there is a big mismatch between symptoms and pathology. With acute pain, symptoms and pathology correlate. So you have damaged tissue and it hurts. With chronic pain, there is no correlation. So something might hurt and there's no tissue damage. And you often have the opposite case as well, where you have tissue damage and no pain, and I'll talk about that more a little bit later. But the reason I chose this topic is because I get a lot of people coming into my studio who suffer from chronic pain and have seen other practitioners, therapists and doctors and whatnot, and are starting to wonder or have often been told that this is all just in their head. And I just want to explain why that kind of is the case, but also why it's not the case. And the reason is that if it's real for your brain, then it's real for your body. And with chronic pain, the reason that often there's pain when there's no tissue damage is because of these adaptations that happen. So say, for example, you sprain your wrist. You're walking up some stairs, not paying attention to what you do, and you sprain, you fall over and you put your hand out, you sprain your wrist. Hey guys, hey Adam, hey Janet, hi Nilesh. Thanks for joining me. And so say you've just sprained your wrist, you've sprained some of the tendons of the flexors of your forearm there, and it hurts and there's inflammation. You go to the physio, you get iced, they wrap it up for you, and 6 weeks later it's still hurting. So what happened during that time, there was pain signals being sent from the site of injury up your arm to your brain. Every time that pathway, the nerve pathway is traversed, it's going to be more facilitated, meaning it's going to want to do that more and more. It's like a muscle, it gets stronger. At the same time, you have more pain-sensitive nerve endings that are growing at the end of that nerve, so that area becomes more sensitive. You have those nerves will start to secrete inflammatory chemicals in that area, so there's more inflammation. Your brain will start to sensitize that area as well. It'll start to pick up information that might not be associated with pain and turn it into pain. An example of sensitization is like the tickle kind of reflex. Sometimes under certain circumstances you can be ticklish. Someone can, touch you in the right spot and you can't stand it. You need to get away from your rolling on the ground in laughter. Whereas under different circumstances, the same touch cannot be ticklish. It can be nothing, right? So the brain decides how it's going to register sensation. And pain is not indicative of tissue damage, it's indicative of threat. And the brain will rank that threat based on a whole heap of factors, including your beliefs and including the how you perceive your situation at the time. And it works both ways. So a couple of examples from the literature are, one, a guy rocks up in an emergency room and he stepped on a nail and it's gone right through the bottom of his shoe and it's come out the top, and the guy's in excruciating pain. So much so that they have to sedate him. They give him morphine and sedate him for the pain. They get him into surgery, put him under the general, and they cut his shoe off, and the nail had gone straight through between his toes. It hadn't actually even pierced his skin. But he believed that nail was going through his foot, and it was so excruciatingly painful that he needed to be sedated. On the other hand, on the other extreme, there was a story of a guy who was in his 80s or 90s, I believe, who had been a World War II digger, and he presented with a sore neck and went into some kind of therapist. I can't remember what sort of therapist it was, but it treated his neck, and the pain persisted. So he went and got an MRI, and they saw there was a bullet lodged in his neck. And the bullet had been there since the Second World War. And he hadn't known that this bullet was lodged in his neck. He didn't realize he'd been shot, because at the time, he was in trench warfare. He was pulling his mates out of danger, and there was bullets flying all over the place. He was returning fire. So his brain didn't rank that bullet in his neck as very important. He didn't even realize he'd been shot. So when you think, Jono, the nail hadn't even touched him. So he perceived pain to be there and made it real. Hey Neil, how are you? Thanks for joining me, guys. Shoot through any questions if you have any. I tend to babble a little bit and ramble on a bit. So those two examples show that pain is not always indicative of tissue damage or of damage. It's indicative of threat and dependent on how the brain ranks that threat. I'm good, Neil. Yeah, I'm loving doing these Facebook Lives. It was good to see Mimi the other day, a few weeks ago. And we also have the other side. The other interesting thing with pain is when studies were done on people with non-symptomatic people, so people who didn't have any pain, just your average Joe Blow from on the street, 80% of those people, I think it was about 76%, had a herniated disc or degenerated lumbar spine and didn't have symptoms. So that's another example of, most people probably have degenerated spines in their backs, but it doesn't give them pain. So when you're looking at chronic pain, when something's been going on for a while, it can often appear that it's in your head because the symptoms don't seem to match anything. And they can come on randomly. One day you're in a lot of pain, the next day you're not. There doesn't seem to be any triggers, and you just don't know why it's happening like that. So just remember, if it's real for your brain, it's real for your body. The other thing that I noticed with these cases is that people get very, very emotionally tied into their pain. So that example of someone with a sprained wrist that turned into a chronic issue, and we're in pain for a couple of years later, that pain will often engulf people's whole life. It's a bit of wrist pain, but it gets worse and worse and worse. And all of a sudden they can't type anymore, and they can't play piano or play guitar. And all this anger starts coming at their work because they were so overworked at the time that they tripped and fell up the stairs. And, none of this stuff helps with pain. And what I see a lot of the time is there's just this belief that if there's pain, that it's related to something mechanical. So people come in here, and even after a long time, they're still thinking there's something wrong and there's something that's got to be cracked, or still looking for a problem, not realizing that there may not be a problem. The other example, the final example I give of this to help you understand pain a little bit, is a phantom limb, where people might have a crush injury. So someone gets their hand crushed under a car or something in an accident. And then the hand becomes infected and gangrenous and gets really painful, and they have to have it amputated. And then after the amputation, so they've not got a hand anymore, and it still keeps hurting. So that people are stuck with this phantom limb pain for life. And I see it in here a lot where people have a low back pain or neck pain and go in for surgery and come out of, I usually see them, you know, months down the track after surgery when they've said, I've even had this surgery and it didn't work. Because if 80% of people out there have a herniated disc in their back and they're non-symptomatic, and if when you have low back pain or neck pain or shoulder pain, you go and get a scan of that structure, there's an 80% chance they're going to find something wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that that is what is causing your pain. It often is, but it's not always the case. And so often people will go and get surgery on a disc or, you know, usually disc surgeries and still have the pain afterwards. And it's analogous to that phantom limb pain where, you know, you've had the actual area removed or had it surgically changed and you're still in pain. So the way that I look at this is the way that I was taught in the CHECK program, the way that I've coached people for the last 14 years, which is to look at the 6 foundations of health, which are thoughts, breathing, hydration, nutrition, movement, and rhythms. With thoughts, you know, like people with pain, as I said, usually get really attached to their pain. It engulfs everything. They become so emotional and tied in to that pain and stop making goals and stop having aspirations. And every time they think about something they want to do, the thought of that pain gets in the way. And that's actually a sign that your pain is chronic and it's centrally generated rather than peripherally generated, is that you'll get triggered by thoughts or emotions. So with regard to thoughts, having a program that focuses on your pain is often only going to make pain worse. If you want to overcome pain, you need to focus on other things. You need to find something that inspires you. You need to find something that gives you a sense of purpose and something that you wake up every morning excited to be doing or to be living, because without that, you're always going to be focusing on your pain. Breathing. You know, I did another Facebook Live on breathing, and I spoke about the biochemical changes that happen in your body and the changes that happen to your nervous system. So with your nervous system, if you're breathing too rapidly, if you're hyperventilating, not only do you see those changes with your blood and the minerals in your body, but you're also going to be a sympathetic dominant. Thanks, Joe. Loving these hearts. You're going to be sympathetic dominant, which means there's more cortisol floating in your blood. So as well as having those increased inflammatory chemicals, more pain-sensitive nerve endings, etc., you've got cortisol floating around your blood. Yeah, people don't realize how important the basics are, Jono. Like breathing, all these things that I'm talking about now are so basic, and a lack of understanding of these things causes like 90% of the health problems that people are being medicated for. If we just knew how to breathe and drink water and eat and sleep and move properly and, you know, have positive thoughts, most of the stuff we see wouldn't be out there. But we've been very disempowered by a system that makes us believe that only a doctor or a therapist or a pill can heal us, and that healing can't come from within us, when ultimately the only way we can truly heal from something, and meaning growing beyond the point where that will ever come back again, is through our own practice and everything. So breathing is really important. Hydration. If you're dehydrated, you will be more inflamed. Everything will be more inflamed. Just notice the next time you have a hangover, just how old aches and pains come up all over the place. Like things that aren't usually sore will be quite sore again. So dehydration can happen in acute terms, meaning you can just not drink enough water for a day or two, or it can happen chronically. And when you don't drink enough water in the long term, your body will start to draw water from your tissues, from your joints and from your fascia. And if you're not putting enough fluids in, then those tissues are going to wear out. You know, a dry, brittle cartilage and dry, brittle fascia doesn't have the same ability to withstand forces that a hydrated one would. Nutrition is massive. Like we do pretty much everything wrong nowadays. Our food has changed so much in the last 10,000 years, but especially over the last 100 years with the Industrial Revolution, with the new farming practices and convenient foods and stuff. There's almost a ubiquitous deficiency of omega-3s, which are super important to prevent inflammation. They're also really important for our brain and for the myelin sheath of your nerves. Fat-soluble vitamins A, D, and K2 are really important for tissue health. They direct minerals where to go in the body. And if you're deficient in those minerals, you tend to find hard tissues going hard and soft tissues going soft. Soft tissues going hard and hard tissues going soft. So you see brittle bones like osteoporosis, and you start to see bone spurs and hardening of arteries and plaque and stuff like that. We lack collagen in our diet. Nutrition is massive here. Get back to traditional eating practices. If you don't know what that is, you can read Weston A. Price's book, Nutrition, Physical Degeneration, or Sally Fallon has a book called Nourishing Traditions that has recipes and stuff like that, which are awesome. Thoughts, breathing, hydration, nutrition, movement. So movement is obviously important. I've spoken about this before in previous lives, that our spinal disc and all of our joints don't have any blood supply. They only get movement. They only get nutrition in, waste products out through movement. So you notice I'm sitting on a Swiss ball here, so I can move. So as I'm bouncing and rolling, my discs are pumping and moving, and they're not getting stagnant. But movement also affects the position that joints are held in. If we do repetitive movements, it can change the position of our joints. If you're always doing pushing movements, if you're always in the gym doing bench press and stuff all the time, it's going to start to have a pull on your shoulder joints. It's going to possibly aggravate things there. Movement as well is important. It's needed to keep our nerves healthy. If nerves aren't healthy because of dehydration, because of poor nutrition, just because of stress, or because of trauma or lack of movement, then the nerve doesn't move in the myelin sheath, and it will get these adhesions. And these adhesions can start to grow these nociceptive nerve endings as well. So you have midway down a nerve, you have what's called an abnormal impulse generating site, where it might feel like the pain's coming in from your hand every time you brush something on your wrist. So movement is incredibly important. We need to move every day. Like, you need to be doing some kind of movement practice every day, even if it's just going for a half an hour walk. We're not designed to stay still. Things go stagnant when you don't move. So get exercising. And the final one is sleep, the rhythms. So, we're incredibly dependent on rest and sleep. Our brain is very dependent on sleep. There's a whole process, there's a whole system in our brain called the glymphatic system that when we sleep, it starts to flush out toxins and stuff that are built up throughout the day. If we don't get enough sleep, we get a buildup of these things in the brain, and it decreases function. Sleep as well for inflammation. If you're not rested, you're going to have abnormal cortisol. How can we get better sleep, Jono? So that's a great question. The first thing is with sleep, we need to pay attention to what's called sleep hygiene, which is basically making sure your environment is good. So, where you sleep, your bedroom should be dark. There shouldn't be any light. If you can get to the bathroom at night without switching a light on, then it's too light. We should have complete darkness. Your body has cortisol receptors in your skin, and even a slight little bit of light will stimulate cortisol and wake us up sometimes, or at least make sleep less solid. So we need to have dark. We need to have silence. You know, your bedroom should be quiet and it should be cool. You always sleep a lot better. Body temperature drops in the night. So you need to have a cool environment as well. I used to have an eye mask. Yeah, eye masks are good. Like, you're better off to have an eye mask, definitely. But ultimately, you have complete dark in your room. Eye masks come off, and they don't stop the receptors in your skin. Yeah, and just, you know, winding down as well, turning off screens, turning lights down, or just having candles after 8 o'clock, having a hot bath in the winter time can be nice with lavender oil and stuff like that. You know, reading something, just winding yourself down for bed. You know, we just don't have dark and quiet anymore. Haley and I went camping last week. You know, and we're out in the middle of the Blue Mountains with no power. It wasn't a powered campsite or anything like that. And by 7 o'clock, like, we'd have dinner, and I was totally exhausted. Like, as the sun went down, it reaches darkness, and you don't have phones, and you don't have all these distractions and noise and stuff, and you can just hear the sounds of the possums and crickets and stuff like that. And man, I just slept so well. And we're meant to be like that, you know. We're meant to sleep with the sun. So when the sun rises, we should wake up. As it goes down, we go to sleep, and our body's wired that way. But now we have all these blue lights and stuff, and hence why the blue glasses are good, John. And there's an app called Flux, which can block the blue lights from your screen, because the blue light stimulates cortisol. G'day, Sinclair, my fasting friend. Yeah, so the 6 foundations of health: thoughts, breathing, hydration, nutrition, movement, and rhythms are the way to get yourself healthy. And when you're healthy, your body is able to compensate and heal from these things. It's not always the case that you just do these. There's often specific measures that individuals need to have. They might have compensation patterns from the pain, and that's causing more pain. And there might be more going on. People have infections and things like that, or have environmental toxin overload in their system. There's often things that need extra help, but most of the time, if you follow those factors, you'll be sweet. So thanks for joining me today, guys. If anyone has any last questions, shoot them through now. Otherwise, I'm going to go have my lunch. Ciao.